All right, council, it is 6 p.m. We'll start the Sartell City Council meeting for May 13th. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, next item on our agenda is the agenda review and adoption. I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. On to special presentations. We have our 2023 financial statement and audit.
Good evening, I'm Jackie Knowles with Bergen KDV. I'm going to be going over a summary of the results of our audit, and then we'll also take a look at the financial operating results for 2023. With our audit, we're providing assurance on the reliability and the accuracy of the city's financial statements, and then also we're testing for compliance with certain state and federal requirements. The main purpose of our audit is to provide the independent auditor's report. In this report, we're providing our opinion on the financial statements, so we state management's responsibility, which is for the numbers, and our responsibility is to test those amounts and offer our opinion, which is an unmodified or a clean opinion. It's the best that we can offer and the same that the city has been receiving. We also issue a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. We take a closer look at the city's internal controls and then also compliance with laws, grants, contracts, other regulations. We didn't have any compliance findings. We did have 2 internal control findings. The first is the lack of segregation of accounting duties, so one person handling multiple steps in a transaction process. To fix this finding, it would take probably at least 1 additional person involved in the day-to-day transaction processing, but then the top finance staff person would not be able to have access to make any changes in the accounting system and just be at the reviewer type role. And so that's where it gets really difficult to get rid of this finding completely. And then the second one, we proposed 1 audit adjustment. It was related to the purchase of the landfill. So an unusual and an infrequent type of transaction, but we did propose a liability to record the closure and post-closure costs and also that land asset. And then our last report is related to Minnesota legal compliance, so testing for certain state statutes is required by the Office of the State Auditor, and we did not have any findings there either. So with that, we'll move on to some of the financial results. This first graph takes a look at the city's tax capacity, levy, and rates. The city's tax capacity has gone up each of the years presented, including a large jump in 2023 with a significant increase in property market values. The city's tax levy that the council approved for 2023 was increased to match the increase in tax capacity, and so the city's rate has been virtually unchanged over the last 3 years and very stable over the last 10. Looking at the general fund next, the city's main operating fund, we take a look at revenues, which have increased each of the last 5 years, including a 3% increase in total from 2022 to 2023. The biggest reason for that increase was property taxes, which were up over $500,000 with that levy increase. A couple other notable changes, intergovernmental revenues were down. That's because a portion of federal pandemic funding was used in 2022 for public safety salaries, and that was not the case in 2023. Licenses and permits and charges for services were both down, with decreased building and development activity. And then other revenues were up about $306,000, and included in that is investment earnings, contributions and donations, things like that. And that increase was related to investment earnings. There was an unrealized loss in 2022 on the city's investments as they were marked to market value, and then that kind of evened out in 2023 with an unrealized gain. Looking at expenditures in total, those were up about 8.8%, and those have also increased each of the last 5 years. That increase is seen across most programs or functions of the city, and a lot of that is due to wage increases. There was a 6% cost of living adjustment, and then also employees qualifying for STEP increases received those as well. In addition, for public safety, which reported the largest increase, there were increased workers' compensation costs and overtime hours. Public works saw inflationary type increases across fuel, utilities, and materials, and then snow removal costs were up about $70,000 with the record-breaking snowfall in early 2023, so seeing that at cities across the state. And then for Parks and Recreation, the city did take over operations at the community center in mid-2022, so that first full year of that impact in 2023. And then for general government, increased fees for IT and paying for the accounting system from the general fund in 2023 for the first year also impacted expenditures. This looks at the city's spending allocation over the last couple of years, and with the audit we do look at this because as expenditures change and grow, we do like to see that fairly evenly across the city's functions or programs, which is indeed what we see here, just 1 percentage point variance here and there. And then for budget to actual results, total revenues came in almost 3% over budget, and there were some variances across the programs, but the largest variance was the miscellaneous revenues, which again includes investment earnings, contributions, and donations, etc. And that was just due to conservative budgeting across the board. Some of those revenue streams can vary significantly from year to year, so just being conservative with that budget. And then expenditures were over budget about 4.5%. And the largest variances were seen with public works. The city didn't anticipate such high increases in utilities and fuel and snow removal costs, and then general government, legal, and technology fees came in more than anticipated. So looking at the bottom line, the budget council budgeted for a break-even year, no change in fund balance, and fund balance actually decreased about $90,000. And we'll see where fund balance ended up on the next slide here. So in 2023, expenditures did exceed revenues, and then factoring the transfers and other financing sources, fund balance ended at about $4.7 million in total. This amount does equal 45% of the budgeted 2024 expenditures and transfers out, and the city's policy is to maintain a minimum of 40 to 60% of the general fund's operating budget and working capital. So the city is in those parameters. It is lower than what has been seen in previous years. Last year, that percentage was 52%. And then we'll move on to the water fund. Operating revenues were very consistent over the last 3 years. Some changes from 2022 to 2023. There was an increase in the usage fees and an increase in usage, but the connection fees were down with decreased building activity. Operating expenses were up about 8%. Again, the wage and benefit increases that I discussed earlier. This fund is generating about $600,000 of operating income in 2023. However, there are large debt service payments coming out of this fund, and this fund typically makes significant investments in infrastructure each year, and that's not reflected in this graph. Looking at the cash flow of the water fund, cash did increase about $80,000 as a result of 2023 operations, so still seeing a positive change there. And then moving on to the sewer fund, we do see a big decrease in operating revenues from that high point in 2022, and then in 2022, that's the year that a portion of the pool capacity was sold to the city of Foley. So that's the main reason for that decrease. Operating expenses were up about 16%, and that's primarily related to depreciation expense on sewer rights purchased from the city of St. Cloud. This fund also does have significant debt service payments and amounts paid for infrastructure, investment in infrastructure. So factoring those in, cash flow did decrease about $900,000 in the sewer fund this year. Over $1 million was invested into infrastructure in 2023. And the last fund we'll look at is the Stormwater Fund. Operating results were very consistent from 2022 to 2023. This fund is covering a portion of depreciation expense as it has most of the last 5 years. And then this is a new graph this year. It's the net position of the city, or the total equity position of all of the funds combined. And the city's total net position has increased each of the last 5 years, which is an indicator of the city's overall strong financial health. The net investment in capital asset amount has also increased each of the last 5 years as the city continues to grow and invest in infrastructure and other capital assets. In addition, the city is paying down its debt faster than its capital assets are being depreciated. The restricted and the unrestricted net positions have fluctuated over the last 5 years, and that is largely due to changes in the city's share of the statewide PERA pension liability. That liability amount can really fluctuate based on updates in the actuarial's valuation. And last, we'll look at some comparative information with your neighboring cities. This is the tax capacity rate. We saw Sartell's rate earlier, which has been consistent and lower than the neighboring cities, as seen here with the exception of Sauk Rapids in 2023. These graphs show the area's city's levies compared to local government aid. For the past couple of years, LGA is determined by the State Department of Revenue based on a formula comparing a city's expenditure need to its ability to pay. So you can see how that can vary quite significantly from city to city. And then the last graph takes a look at spending per capita in the general fund. 2022 is the most recently available comparative information, but I will note that the 2023 goal for Sartell was $500 per capita, and the actual spending was $486 per capita out of the general fund in 2023. And that concludes my presentation, what I had prepared. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Council, any questions for Jackie or staff? Jill?
Question. Jackie, how does the audit adjustment affect any previously issued financial statements?
It doesn't affect any previously issued financial statements. The sale closed in 2023, so it just impacted the 2023 financial statements, and there was no impact on the general fund or any of the numbers that you would have seen throughout the year in any monthly reports. It's just at that government-wide level where we have to pull in the long-term liabilities and the capital assets for that presentation. That's the only thing that it impacted.
Okay, thank you.
And just one thing to note too, there's certainly a lot to consume there, and there's not a single amount within the financial statements that truly summarizes our financial performance, because we're not profit motivated like the private sector. So instead, as Jackie had mentioned, near-term financial position, 45% of general fund balance, which is above our policy, and then also our net position is still gradually increasing, is two good indicators to look at when considering financial health of the city. So I just wanted to note that.
Rob, I also love the note from Jackie that we're paying down our debt faster than our depreciation. I think that continues to keep us in a good position. One item, if you could comment on for us or help us understand it, Rob, is the sewer fund revenue, the decrease in 2023. 2022 was an odd year with, I believe, some Foley when we sold off that portion. But it looks like we had this pretty good trend moving 19, 20, 21, 23 was back. Is that something we should plan for in the future?
Yeah, so that's going to be part of our utility billing study.
Okay.
They'll consider our past performance and try to make that an indicator of future performance based on our tiered rate structure. So revenue being down in 2023, obviously part of that being our sale in 2022 and that falling off in 2023. But then I'm sure majority of it being volume. Even though we did increase our rate within 2023, water usage must have been down to then have revenue trending downwards from 2021 to 2023.
Okay.
But yeah, our future, our 5 to 10 year plan will be modeled in the utility billing study. So we'll have a closer look at that when we get to it.
And a reminder for council or everyone, I guess, but today, as Rob talked about, we're gonna be going through a study, but our sewer is a calculation driven from water usage, right? So sounds odd that we use less water, which is gonna drive our sewer, but it's a formula. Okay, thank you.
And when is that study planned for? It's this year, right?
Yeah, we had actually kicked it off a couple of weeks ago. They had requested a ton of information and data from us, and they're working on building out the model, and they'll come forward with some suggestions on a tiered rate structure and making sure that we're recovering all our costs for any operating and capital purchases over the next 5 to 10 years. So more to come, I believe in a couple of months is when they plan on presenting to council.
Council, any other questions or comments? Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Council, next on our agenda is the open forum public comment. Don't have anyone registered for that. We'll move on to the approval of city council minutes. We have April 22nd regular meeting. I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the April 22nd regular meeting minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We have consent agenda. We have items A through G. We'll look for a motion on those.
I'll make a motion to approve items A through G.
We have items A through G. Motion to approve. Is there a second?
No, second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Public hearings. We have 2 public hearings tonight. First one is MS4, public participation.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The first item for public hearings is our requirement that annually we have to offer an opportunity for the public to make any comments regarding our MS4 general permit. There's multiple requirements and minimum control measures. This is just checking one of the boxes off for that, to have that opportunity for the public to comment. One item of note is that if you remember back to last year when we did this, we were waiting on the state to complete their new reporting system, which was supposed to be done last year. However, they still are working on it. So this year, when they're complete, they'll have to submit for 2023 and 2024 as well. So that is all I have. Any questions, I'd be happy to ask, and hopefully Lisa or Hunter would answer those for you.
Council, any questions before we open the public hearing on the MS4? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on the MS4 permit, please step forward. Second call, anyone wishing to testify? Third and final call, anyone wishing to testify on the MS4 permit? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion on the MS4 permit. Sorry, just holding the public hearing.
Correct. Thank you. Yep. We don't need a motion.
We'll move on to the second one, which is preliminary and final plat for Share House.
All right. The preliminary and final plat for Share House. Rob, if you could pull up the plat, please. You can see that it is our Scooters Cafe location. If you go back to end of 2022, when this was initially being developed, one of the requirements was to preliminary and final plat the property. However, there was some significant property line issues that ultimately had to be resolved in court, and that was completed this year. So they submitted their preliminary and final plat. Planning Commission reviewed this year and recommended for approval as well. We have resolved all our outstanding comments from engineering and any other development comments, and they did pay the platting fees and park dedication fees back in 2022 when they initially submitted this for approval. So everything has been resolved as of now. Any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Council, any questions before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on the preliminary and final plat for the share house, please step forward. Second call, anyone wishing to testify? Third and final option, anyone wishing to testify on the preliminary and final plat for the share house? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Council discussion.
This is Scooters, correct?
Looks to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Carrie, the building's already built. Help us understand why we're doing a preliminary and final plat, and/or is there really an option?
Yeah, good question. Back when this was initially getting developed, we did make a ordinance change that any developed or redeveloped properties had to be final platted. And this kind of was what sparked that requirement. We also need right of way for Pinecone there as well, and we need a dedicated easement for their stormwater. So part of the platting is ensuring we have our right of way and all of our easements in place. So it just seems silly that it's after the building's built, but ultimately there was some lot line disputes with neighbors, so this also resolved that.
Okay.
It does seem silly. It resolves a lot of things for the city.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, I would look for a motion on the preliminary and final plat for share house.
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. On to department reports. PD.
Mayor, members of the council, I'll cover PD and fire since Chief Kudrowski's out. We did have a joint EM tabletop with Pete and I and all the city hall staff, and it was kind of a light introduction to tabletop exercises, so it gave the city hall staff some awareness to their roles. Our new public works director kind of see how we do things here, and all hands on deck during an EOC activation. So it was a really good exercise and intended to be kind of a light one. Simulated a tornado had touched down in town and taken out a number of homes and needed evacuation and shelters and different things. So it was good. It was a good exercise. But it's in for any questions.
Council, any questions for PD? Tim?
Mr. Mayor. Chief, any needs or issues that arose that you might need addressed or future considerations?
For the EM?
For the EM?
I think we're like prepared now to do the full-blown exercise where like everyone has very specified roles that need to be covered. The only other thing that did come up was not necessarily needs, was there is a handbook out there for elected officials during an EOC activation. I wasn't sure if you guys have received that in the past or.
Yeah, we've done not a full blown, but a better than a tabletop with a tornado a little bit north of here. And so I know we walked through it at that point. Not sure.
Yeah,
It'd probably be a good workshop refresher.
yeah, I could get something to you. It's pretty, it's not a huge booklet, but it just kind of gives you a good rundown. And we did kind of establish through this last one of the bigger meeting spaces at the public safety facility for elected officials. Because oftentimes we can't have you in the EOC, just if things are developing quickly, but having a briefing area where we can brief you. And I was able to teach everyone on open meeting laws and having some discussion on, you can't violate open meeting laws just because there's a state of emergency, but there's some workarounds to try to get you guys information and do briefings.
Yeah, I'd love for us as a council to work through that, because we do have the ability to call an emergency meeting at moment's notice. And we have had instances in town where individual elected officials would show up on scene of a larger, more politicized event. And so it'd be great for all of us to have that as we're going through other training right now.
Yeah, it
Great
would be.
workshop, I don't.
If we do that next full-blown one, getting you guys included and have some briefings come your way, and then of course if it's bad enough, the governor decides to show up, which always can throw a wrench in where are we going to put him and different things like that too, or then other elected officials in town.
Happened 12 years ago.
Yeah.
We've lived it, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think also we have a unique situation. If there was something and two of us are actually on scene,
Mm-hmm.
then, what's the hierarchy of that? Do you pull out and go do your political stuff, or how do we address that, I guess, is probably a good scenario to run through.
Well, like for roles and responsibilities, Anna would take care of a lot of the inward communication with elected officials and communications. Nikki would do the outward one, but you guys are elected officials, and you may want to speak after a briefing and get in front of a camera and talk a little bit about what you learned in the briefing. And a lot of that we kind of pull away from. Right, it's your choice as an elected official to do those.
Yep. Good, thank you. Engineering.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of council. You have our report. One thing that I just wanted to note, it's not necessarily a city project, but we did have the pre-construction meeting for the Stearns County 120 and County Road 1 project last week. So they're roundabout by Walmart, and just wanted to make note that they are planning on starting that detour just after Memorial Day and full-time construction beginning in June there. So again, fully a county project. If there's any questions and stuff, the county has a lot of information on that, but just wanted to point it out as far as traffic's concerned. There'll probably be some impacts there. So be happy to answer any questions in the report.
I appreciate you calling that one out. Something we should continue to be active on so that the questions go to the right.
Right. And I will note, we do have the surge tank project that will be starting up, adjacent there, but, so there is a city project close there, but as far as traffic's concerned, the surge tank will be off the road, so that'll all be a county project.
Perfect. Good one.
Can you tell us the duration and the detour off the top of your head?
Yeah, I don't know the exact detour. I do know the plan initially was to send traffic to the Benton County side. I know they were working with Benton County on using Benton Drive for part of that. So I think that's kind of the planned route there. I'd have to look at the county website to confirm. And then the tentative schedule, like I said, they're starting construction early June. And then at least right now, it's construction, but they're planning for I think it was the second or third week in August that could be wrapping that up and have that back open again. So.
Wow. That's a major impact for
A lot of people.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for engineering? Thank you. Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. A little bit of a format change for this month. I did have engineering complete last month, but for April and going forward, we're going to kind of start to split off Public Works from engineering. So different format, but you'll also see some repeats. We obviously cross over quite a bit. So we'll try not to get too redundant on things, but any questions you guys have, go ahead.
Awesome. Any questions for Public Works? Looks good. Thank you. Council, next up, commission updates.
None at this time.
City Council committee updates, miscellaneous business. Tim.
Nothing tonight?
Jill.
Just that I attended the Mill District stakeholder meeting on May 2nd, I believe it was, at GSDC. They hosted the event, did a tremendous job hosting it. There were probably, I don't know how many, 20 to 30 interested stakeholders. The meeting started off with Patty Garland giving a historical review of the mill and how we got to this point, you know, starting from when the mill was built and started operations up until actually current. And so I think that gave a great context to the day or the morning. And we received a lot of really interesting feedback. Anita was there presenting how, you know, what she's been working on in the vision for each stage of redevelopment. And we got a lot of feedback from contractors and interested parties from around the state. And I think three key takeaways that I heard that day were they agreed with the phase one being trails and getting utilities in place. They felt like that was a really important first step in terms of redevelopment. They also felt that there's a general consensus that we do need to remove some level of concrete. I know the city doesn't really want to hear that, but they had some really good points about what it means to be shovel ready and how we entice people there. I think the third major thing I heard was that it may take a larger attraction on the site to really encourage some of that redevelopment. But Carrie and Hunter and Anna were there too, so if you guys have anything else to contribute.
I don't have anything to add. I would echo your takeaways, and I walked away feeling affirmed that we have done the appropriate level of engagement and that our plan reflects that and that we have a really great path forward. Obviously, I have some decisions to make regarding, the concrete and the access and overall site management, I think, of just trying to really have a sense of control around design standards and ordinances around it and the who, whether it's one developer or multiple developers and the sale of that property. But overall, I felt really positive about the affirmation of, yep, you're on the right path forward. So that was encouraging to feel like it wasn't any different voice or feedback that we hadn't already heard.
Great, that's it.
Thanks. Alex? Jed? I don't have anything either, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.